Ready. And a lot of this stuff we've already kind of mentioned somewhat. First thing, take note of parallels between Kafka's relationship with his father and Gregor's relationship with his father. Certainly us talking about the journal entries, the diary entries will kind of help with that. But do kind of look for some similarities that are going to take place. This would be a picture of his father, not Kafka himself. A couple other things to kind of take note of. And for anyone who did start reading, you pick up very early, it's weird, it's different, it's certainly going to be strange and unique. The style is kind of referred to as expressionism, and this is something that Kafka kind of is developing on his own. You're going to be dealing with very symbolic characters, a lot of exaggeration and distortion is going to take place. Within the second sentence, you're going to go, what in the world is essentially going on? You can't look at everything as being absolutely literal. There's going to be certainly some symbolic qualities, some symbolic events. Dream-like distortion and imagery is going to take place. And the whole idea about this, and we'll kind of get into dreams as we start going over the book, the idea is that your emotional reactions and responses to things are more important than the object itself or the situation itself. So kind of view the story as Gregor, or you could even argue Kafka's reaction to the conflicts that are going on, not so much the literal event itself that would be taking place. The good news is, with a limited number of characters, it's easy to kind of focus in on the metaphorical, the symbolic, the exaggeration type things that can take place with it. Expressionism is something that, for those involved in art, people kind of look at quite a bit. So the hope is that it gets people to kind of think critically and reflect and question things. Anyone know either of these two paintings? Scream and Starry Night. You know artists?
Picasso.
Which one?
Van Gogh's the Starry Night.
Starry Night is Van Gogh.
That one's the guy that cut off his ear.
Van Gogh is, yes. It's not Picasso.
Oh, it's Raphael.
No, you're thinking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Right.
Begins with an M. No. Monk. I forget his first name. Last name is Monk. For both of these, there's certainly very famous pictures. People recognize them. And you could go, the one on the right is Starry Night, and no one's going to doubt it. At the same time, if you were to take a picture of a Starry Night and hold it up against the painting, they would look very, very different. And there could be a variety of reasons for it. The one thing that's kind of tough with Van Gogh paintings, and if you've ever been to Carnegie's Art Museum, they have at least one that is there. It's not Starry Night, but there's another one. His paintings are very thick. They're like almost three-dimensional, like really thick gobs of paint that are kind of on there. So it adds a little bit more texture to it. It's an interpretation of what would be taking place. It's not just trying to do a literal, image for image reproduction of what he sees. So it's still there, but you do some distortion to kind of get a little bit more thought-provoking ideas to it. The book is going to be, or the text is going to be very much the same way. Don't think of it as just being a literal word-for-word depiction of the scenes that take place, but it's presented in a way for you to make you kind of think about it a little bit. The screen probably matches up a little bit more with the text itself. You still have that distortion, you still have that reflection, the thinking critically, but you have a little bit more of a nightmarish, dark kind of quality to it, which is something that's going to present itself within the text quite a bit. But Kafka kind of presents his book in a way similar to what the art world would be looking at with expressionism, which is going to go very much against realism. So it's not an accurate, true depiction, but a representation of it. The term that gets used quite a bit is surrealism, and we might say, hey, this is a very surreal situation. Surreal kind of means it's a blend of the real world, but also unlikely, fantasy, nightmarish, dream-like quality. So if you go, something is surreal about where you're at, something isn't quite exactly the same, something isn't quite the way that it should be. With surrealism, you get a lot of conflict between the conscious and the unconscious world, And this kind of lends itself into the whole idea of existentialism. And the belief of an existentialist would be that we're created by experiences. So you're not born the way that you are shaped by the experiences that you have, by the people you interact with, by the values, the morals, and whatnot that kind of get passed down to you. So, do we say metamorphosis means? Some kind of change, some kind of transformation. From an existentialist viewpoint, that transformation wouldn't be something that naturally happens, but it would be something that is created by the experiences, the people, the society, whether it be religious viewpoints or anything else. That is what's going to cause that change to take place. So there's certainly going to be some surreal, dreamlike scenes, and this whole existential viewpoint where you're not created in the way that you are, but you develop that way through your experiences. Those will be some things that we're going to take a look at. You will not detach your face from the rest of your head or anything like that. I hope not. And we got one more slide that we're going to take a look at. Kafka-esque is a term that gets used to describe his overall style of writing. Roald Dahl is someone who you might be familiar with or have read some of his stories or at least seen depictions of him. So having a nightmarishly complex, bizarre, illogical quality about him, you're blending the real world with the absurd one. 8th grade, did you guys read The Landlady?
Yes.
Short story with stuffs.
Food.
Yeah, that's Roald Dahl. And that's another author. Roald Dahl also does James and the Giant Peach. Matilda would be Charlie. Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory would be his most famous one. We'll read actually a Roald Dahl short story later on. Roald Dahl he's an author. He would be one who people kind of align as being very much like Kafka. I don't think you're going to go, hey, this story is exactly The Landlady, but that blend of reality as well as, are you kidding me, kind of weirdness. Some elements of it, yeah. Now, Roald Dahl, Landlady short story. We're going to take a look at the short story.
What is it?
I would say Poe definitely you have the same dark quality. I think this one is going to be a little bit more absurd in the sense that not quite as realistic as something Poe. But certainly so far as the quality, the imagery, that would be accurate. By Dahl?
Yeah.
When we do, we'll do a short story unit shortly after this one, and he'll be one of the short stories. It's called The Lamb to the Slaughter.
Oh.
All right.
Congratulations.
Piece of paper is coming out.
And again,
Blank paper. He did. Once you get your piece of paper, fold it in half. I knew that was going to be your next question, and the answer is it doesn't matter. You can fold it in half either way.
Which way you
Go verbal. I make it both. No. The reason it does not matter is because you're going to then fold it the other way. So when you are all done, you're going to have 4 quadrants. It's a very mathematical term.
Then you told me to write how to make the roads in 4th grade.
Good.
Alright, so when you're all done, you're going to have four sections of the paper like this.
What did these mean?
In the middle, I want you to draw a circle, a little bit bigger than a quarter, but not like huge. So a little circle, about quarter size.
Like that.
Yeah, unfold it then. So once you got your 4 quadrants, circle,
More bucket here.
like a little bigger than a quarter. No quarter to like $half. Yep.
Mine's like a dollar.
I didn't know. Inside your circle, then I want you to write Kafka Diary. Kafka Diary. If it goes outside of your circle a little bit, that's okay. So inside circle, Kafka Diary, which is the document that you picked up. And then in the corners of the quadrants, the first one up here at the top, I want you to write Father. When you go to the other side, I want you to write Other People. And then on the bottom one, bottom two, I want you to have one that says style or like figurative language. So we got Father, Other People, style, figurative language, and then the other one is going to be emotions. Emotions are like feelings. So Kafka Diary in the middle, Father, Other People, style / figurative language, emotions. Okay. What we're going to do is take out then the diary. We're not reading his whole entire diary, but we're going to take a look at passages here from 1911. We're going to read them. While I'm reading them, and we'll talk a little bit about them, I want you to start to kind of fill in these quadrants, these areas, based on stuff that we read. So, as a person gets mentioned that's not the father, write down the person's name over here. When the father does get mentioned, and he's going to be mentioned quite a bit, what would be some details about the father that you are noticing? Okay, so by the time everything is all said and done, we'd have a list of all the people who are showing up in the diary entries. We'd have a list of like descriptions and things like that about his father. Style, figurative language, what would be things about the way that he writes that just kind of jumps out to you? So if you notice, there's a hyperbole or there's a metaphor, you could like write that down. If you notice something about the kinds of words that he uses, or if there's a specific word that jumps out because it seems to be a pretty powerful one, we want you to write that one down. And then for the emotions, it's a diary. It's a journal. Usually you write about in a diary or journal things that you are feeling, whether it be something good, something bad, something that's troubling you, something that's bothering you. Write down what those emotions would be while we're going through. Okay.
Wait, what are we going through? That thing that I didn't pick up?
So, if you have world maps or anything like that, you want to make sure they are put away so that we can focus on diary entry. Starting with 1911, August the 26th, just going to read through it, jot some things down. I'll give you some verbal cues, and then we'll just kind of go over what's happening.
Thanks, buddy. You're welcome.
Luke, you missed out a full paper. Oh well. Alright, so August 26th. Tomorrow I am supposed to travel to Italy. This evening, Father could not sleep for excitement and sheer anxiety about his business, which has made him ill. A damp cloth on his chest, nausea, difficulty in breathing, pacing up and down, sun. Mother is fearful, but finds new consolation in the fact that he has always been so energetic, he's always coped with everything, and now I tell her the trouble with the business cannot last more than another 3 months, and that everything will be fine. So at this point, which column could you have, or which quadrant could you have put something in? What do you have for emotions? Okay, mother is fearful. Where else do we put mother? Other people. Anyone put anything down yet for mother? Jillian? Okay, descriptive. You could put for father. Ill. Okay, so just getting these little things.
And for emotions, what do we put, like, what we think, how...
What do you think his emotion would be? So, whether it be his emotion or you could include emotions of other people, but it's not your reaction to the diary, to the journal.
Okay,
it's what is the reaction of him. Okay. Father is normally energetic, but at this point he's ill. But yeah, you could put like typically energetic. Now, I read like 2 sentences. It's not that every time I read 2 sentences you're going to be able to fill out all 4, but you're starting to kind of get an idea for
Wait,
what
all
we're doing.
4?
All 4 of those things. Like we just mentioned all of them, I think.
Descriptive.
He paces up and down, sighing and shaking his head. He is aware that we cannot take on his burden or otherwise rid him of it, but even we are aware, despite our good intentions, of the sad necessity that he must provide for his family. Through his frequent yawning or his incidentally not revolting nose picking, Father reassures us slightly, barely perceptibly about his condition, even though he generally never does when healthy. Okay. October 31st. In case my father should ever call me again a bad son, I am writing down now so as not to forget that he, in front of several relatives and without particular reason, perhaps simply to make me feel small or perhaps because he means to save me, called Max a... I was hoping you were going to say it. I can't say it. I'm going to
That's
mess it
sugar.
Father's a meanie head.
Anyone have any idea what that means?
We can write down Max.
Hot-headed fool, basically.
Oh.
You could just write down Max. So, called Max a hot-headed fool. It's Yiddish. And remember, families, religion, they are,
Listen,
they're Jewish. So, Yiddish phrases and things like that are not going to be unusual. And that today, when Loie was in, probably Lobe, was in my room, he spoke with ironic bodily convulsions and contortions of the mouth of all the strangers that are being allowed into the flat, asking what one could possibly find of interest in strangers, or why one should ever enter into such useless relationships, etc. But I should not have written this down, as I have positively written myself into a state of hatred for my father, a hatred for which he has given me no cause today, a hatred which, at least as far as his statements about Lobe are concerned, is disproportionately great, and a hatred which is increased by the fact that I cannot actually remember anything vicious in the way father behaved yesterday. Okay, so now, taking a look at those 2 entries, just to kind of start to get some things down and see what people have. Tommy, what's one thing that you have for any of these areas? Okay, so we've mentioned this one. Oops, I'm going to change the colors for that. One thing that I would put for which journal is he sickly in? What was our date for that one?
August 31st.
Okay, it is that. I think it's August the 11th?
Wait.
August 26th.
Oh,
Simple reason doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be sickly the whole way through. So that if that seems to be unusual, I want to make sure I know when that happens. What would be another one that we could put down for anywhere, Ben? Okay. Anyone put anything for style based on his use of the word hatred? As to what he did with hatred? There was a ton of repetition that was taking place with the hatred. Shai, what was?
I just think it's very emotional.
I don't like. What do you mean by emotional? Just because I don't want to put emotional in the emotion column.
Because he's writing a bunch of these emotions that he's feeling at the moment.
Okay, so do you get do his emotions seem to vary?
Not really for now.
Okay, but they are very, especially if he's using the term hatred, his emotions are probably very strong. Adam? And who was someone we mentioned in the first one? Mother. I don't mean like disagree, because clearly he's interpreting that way. Has father said or done anything that you, like, objectively would go, he is a mean person?
Yeah, whenever you called Max a
Okay. Oops. Calls Max a. I'm just gonna put hothead. Alright. Anything else? Okay. The next one is October the 16th. I don't know why it goes backwards. We're going from October the 31st to October 16th. I'm guessing that's just an editor mistake. October 16th. Exhausting Sunday yesterday. The entire staff handed Father its resignation. Through kind words and congeniality and exploiting his illness, his great presence, and previous vigor, his experience and cleverness, he won them back, almost all of them, in general and private discussions. There's some deep thought that was taking place there. What do we know? I don't mean this in like an emotional way. What do we also know about Father now? Based on the first one from August of 26, why he's feeling kind of sickly, and what this thing tells us so far is about how does he get his money. We don't know the exact profession, but what is he? And he seems to own a business because what happens? The entire staff handed Father its resignation. So who would you give your resignation letter to?
The boss.
The boss, the one who was in charge. So seems to be business owner. We don't know. Why do you think the staff might hand in its resignation? The entire staff?
He's sick.
Rude? Sick? But what is he able to do?
Get him back.
He's able to get all of them to stay. So what would be another descriptive that you could put of the father if the entire staff gives a resignation letter and he gets them all to stay? He's persuasive. November the 3rd, Lovi, my father's view. He who sleeps with dogs wakes up with fleas. I could not contain myself and said something out of order, whereupon Father replied, particularly calmly, admittedly considerable later, after we had discussed other things, you know that I am not to be worked up and must be treated carefully, so don't come to me with these things now. I have had just enough about, can't talk. I have had just about enough excitement, more than enough, so spare me such talk. I say, I am doing my utmost to hold back, and sense and Father, as always, in such intense moments, an underlying wisdom of which I can only catch the slightest glimpse.
I have no
I
idea.
don't know, like, type of, but I don't know what exactly this is, but it's a little phrase which is like, he uses with dogs,
Yeah, I mean, it's because you're not going to mean it literally. How do you interpret that he who sleeps with dogs is going to wake up with fleas? Idiom. Well, I'd say more metaphor than idiom. A term that, because idioms, remember, is going to be like pushing up daisies, kicking the bucket, you're pulling my chain kind of thing. So the words themselves don't have the same meaning. I'd say there is probably a little more kind of metaphor with it.
I think he's passive aggressive because.
This is Father?
I don't know. It just says that I say I'm doing my utmost to hold back, and that's a very passive aggressive thing to do.
Okay, who's saying that?
I guess.
If it's I,
Kafka.
it's going to be Kafka. So for emotions, and this might be a little bit different than emotions, but we could certainly put passive aggressive. I think you get the sense that who also is probably passive aggressive? I think you could probably say Father is too. Figurative language, we got a metaphor. You could also argue, depending if you agree with it or not, an aphorism is like a wise saying, aphorism. It's like fortune cookies would be aphorisms or maxims. So, Father going, he who sleeps with dogs wakes up with fleas. If he's talking about his friend, Nuvi, He who sleeps with dogs wakes up with fleas. What's he probably calling Luby? Okay, basically the dog, you spend time with him, you are going to get fleas, which is going to be a bad thing. You hang out with Luby, you're going to be getting the negative consequences that kind of come along with it. Chances are, who is Luby in relation to Kafka? Is it? Don't write it down yet. Friend or brother? Because those are probably the two most common ones that we're going to have.
Maybe better.
It just says yesterday when
I'm gonna
Luby
go
was
with
in my
like
room, he
not so
spoke
close friend.
with bodily convulsions, contortion. Why would you talk about someone else's father that badly if you're not?
Well, he also doesn't like his own son too.
Well, who spoke with bodily convulsions?
Luby did.
Now, when Luby was in my room, he goes back, he called Max a Mishnergerwritten, and then yesterday, when Luby was in my room, he spoke with ironic bodily convulsions and contortions of the mouth of all the strangers that are being allowed into the flat. Remember, flat's an apartment. Asking what one could possibly find of interest in strangers. So he being father, is viewing Luby not as a what? What term does he use? Not the hothead, but who's being allowed in the flat? Strangers. So if it were a brother, probably wouldn't refer to him as a stranger. So who is the stranger? It would be his friend. And since he also calls Max such things, we could probably assume that Max is also a friend with a sister named Ruby. November 5th. I want to write, my head is throbbing. I sit in my room surrounded by the clamor of the entire flat. I hear all the doors slamming, at least the racket spares me the footsteps going between them, but I can still hear the oven door banging shut in the kitchen. Father bursts into my room and out the other side, his dressing gown trailing behind him. In the next room, I can hear ash being scraped out of the stove. Valley asks into the unknown through the anteroom as if across a Parisian alleyway. Whether Father's hat has been polished yet, this well-intentioned whisper provokes a scream in reply. The front door is unlatched, creaking like a catarrhal throat, then open further with the brief sound of a woman singing, then shut with a dull, masculine jolt, a most inconsiderate sound. Father is gone. Now begins the more tender, more diffuse, more hopeless din of the canaries. Much earlier I had considered, but am now reminded again by the canaries, whether to open the door a little, creep snake-like into the next room, lie on the floor, ask my sisters and their nanny to be quiet. What's bothering Kafka here?
It's
Pretty much
everything.
because people are. So emotion would be
I know all of it.
frustrated, annoyed, probably a little bit angry taking place. I think frustrated would be good. What does he want to do?
Right.
Doesn't want to go to sleep.
Well, why is he talking about his?
Do you notice anything weird about his room? For when his father comes in.
It has two doors.
It has two doors. Well, at least we know it has
It,
more
like,
than one door because he
leads
comes in
into
one
another
door and then
room.
he walks out the other.
It leads into another room.
So, and this would be pretty common with European apartments, where to get to, like, say, someone's bedroom, you have to go through another bedroom. So you think about why you like to go into your bedroom for privacy, get away, and then, you know, your brother needs to get over into his room, he might have to go from the kitchen into the living room into your room to get into his room. So the ability of having privacy probably does get lessened to a pretty large degree. December 14th. This morning, my father reproached me for not caring about the factory. Anyone know what reproached means?
I don't know what his father does.
Like,
Yeah. So, angry, upset with him, kind of insulting him, and now we know business owner who has a factory. But I explained that I had brought shares expecting to profit, but I couldn't contribute to the work as long as I was in the office. Father continued arguing. I stood by the window and remained silent, but that evening I found myself thinking as a result of our morning discussion that I could declare myself very satisfied with my current position and must only be wary of having all my free time for literature. Last one, December 26th. It is unpleasant to listen to Father when he, with endless digressions on the fortunate situations of contemporaries and above all his children, recounts the suffering that he had to endure in his youth. Nobody denies that for years he had open sores on his legs as a consequence of insufficient winter clothing, that he frequently went hungry, and that at a tender age of 10 he had to push a cart from village to village, even in winter and very early in the morning. But these true facts, even combined with the further true fact that I haven't been through all this myself, do not in the slightest warrant his conclusion that I have been happier than him, that the sores on his legs somehow make him superior to me, nor the assumption that he has always made that I cannot do justice to his former life, and finally that I, precisely because I have not experienced the same sufferings, should be infinitely grateful. How happy I would be to hear him speak uninterruptedly of his youth and his parents, but it torments me to listen to it spoken in such a boastful and antagonistic tone. Time and again he claps his hands together, saying, "Who appreciates that these days? What do these children know? Nobody's been through what I have. Can any child understand that today?" What did you write down?
Had a bad week.
For Father? Okay.
Andy expects a lot from whatever his name because his life was so good. Yes.
Bad youth, or difficult youth at the very least. Anybody have anything under people that we have not already put? We got Luvi, Max, Mother.
What's a valley?
We got Sister. Sister is Valley.
Oh, that's his sister.
Kind of think it was like being like Valerie, you know, if you were to anglicize it a little bit. Anything further for emotions? Stress?
Yeah.
Okay.
His father's like close.
He's raising families.
What we're going to do tomorrow when you come in, first thing is you're going to give me a vocabulary list of words. Keep these notes, have them, because you're going to use them then with some keystones, like questions that are going to apply